Westworld Season Finale Recap, The Way Out. The first season of Westworld held a somewhat calm and dramatic shape. After a raucous start, it slowly devolved into some narrative wheel spinning before it came roaring back to life with some late-game fireworks. Season 2 has been a trickier beast. After a tepid start, we've experienced a lot of peaks and valleys, and the show was often at its best when it pulled away from the guessing games and layered timelines and told contained, humane stories. But we have come to the end, and I have to admit that this finale is not only my least favorite episode since the Season 2 premiere, but also that I'm a bit perplexed. Not just in terms of certain logical points, which we'll get into, but I'm wondering about the overall storytelling approach. What should feel like a cathartic release, or a dagger to the chest, instead largely feels like a dreamy act of treading water, one where I couldn't help but find myself feeling disaffected by the majority of it. Perhaps it's that the episode has no real dramatic pacing, rhythm, or crescendo, feeling hurried and yet static all at once, especially as it goes through a lot of purposeless cross-cutting. Or perhaps it's just hard to watch an episode that's constantly explaining itself as it goes along, just as it's hard to watch an episode stretched out to 90 minutes be full of relatively dead air. Even the ending series of vignettes play out with little dramatic purpose, an inhuman series of speeches where characters seem to lecture one another rather than discuss or fight. Most of all, when I look at the big ending reveal with Charlotte, I can't help but wonder why the show took this path at all, because Timeline 4 ends up feeling completely unnecessary. Back in Season 1, the realization that William and the Man in Black were the same person was purposeful because that realization belonged to Dolores's character arc. But this time, there is no real purpose in holding it back. Maybe the show is just like Lucille Bluth and it gets off on being withholding. At least the beginning showed promise. I love the little details of Dolores lying next to Teddy in grief, along with the mournful way she tells old William, "I drove him away." It's these little interiors that remind you of the person underneath the rebel, the kind person she has had to steel herself against. There's also the sadistic detail of the doctor casually swiping up the pain setting before digging into Maeve, along with her self-saving escape with the army of bulls. But these little moments go by the wayside as all of our characters start marching toward the valley in step. Speaking of which, an old William and Dolores team up makes zero narrative sense. She says, "I need a monster," but she not only doesn't, it all blows up just a scene later when he attacks her, so I really don't get the point of that choice at all. Then we quickly reach the big climactic scene in the valley beyond. Turns out the forge holds the data collected about all the park's guests, although even this detail ends up seeming kind of meaningless, or at least doesn't play into the story at hand. far more important to the action is the digital Eden created within the forge. It's one that our hosts can literally run into to escape the torture of this world. Akita's proverbial door, rendered physical. And for 15 minutes, we watch the battle that comes together as Bernard and Dolores dance about in the digital world, getting answers while the battle rages outside. From a dramatic perspective, the sequence plays out as a less exciting, repetitive version of the battle for the cradle. Only true highlight comes in the terrifying moment when we think Akita is shot, only for him to be okay the moment he crosses into the doorway. It's perhaps telling of the show's grating operatics that the person I care about most in this world was introduced just 2 episodes prior, but at least the episode has a series of revelations that really do play into understanding the overall philosophy of the show. Within the Forge, the likeness of Logan lets out a simple truth: the way they found fidelity in copying humans was not by chasing their endless complexities and little details, but in being honest about their simplicity. Their greed, self-preservation, and callousness all just add up to a few lines of code, for the truth is that a human is but a brief algorithm. As Ford will say, they are all just a passenger to their own programming. It's, in some ways, the most cynical idea at the heart of a cynical show, that the hosts can navigate society to a better world simply because they are actually reprogrammable in a way humans are not. But it's also perhaps the real metaphor at the heart of the show, one I find quite beautiful: the powerful hosts of our own society are simply those who have the power to change their behavior. The second big revelation is that Dolores is right, at least in a manner of speaking. Bernard feels despair over the hosts and that they all died for nothing, just as we learn there was no big point to the flood. It was the mere clearing of bodies already gone. And when Charlotte kills Elsie, Bernard realizes that there is no escaping their malice. They will take away the valley beyond and never think twice about it because they do not see hosts as people. Hell, they barely see people as people. All this time, Bernard feared Dolores's violence and her retribution, but all she truly wants is to survive in a real way. Bernard calls her dream a fucking nightmare, but she actually knows that it's a nightmare too. And she wants out of it. I don't want to play cowboys and Indians anymore. I want their world. The world they denied us. Which brings us to the big reveal, or the epilogue as Ford calls it. I've avoided a lot of conjecture in these recaps because I don't like the guessing games, but within the pop culture conversation there was a lot of discussion that Bernard was not who he seemed to be in the fourth timeline. But who was he? Teddy? Arnold? Dolores? It turns out this was the right thinking, but the wrong person. For it was Dolores actually hiding in Charlotte, and now she has the power to get out. The final goodbye scenes play out with an ethereal touch. Even the moment when we realize Stubbs is a host, or that his real mission is to take care of the hosts, feels nice but comes from no real dramatic build-up. It's all part of the same airy quality. Especially Bernard and Dolores's final conversation, where we realize the fidelity tests with Bernard have been taking place in the real world present. Their final dialogue has a somewhat Batman, Joker-esque twang to it, the idea that they'll be locked in a philosophical battle forever, but the more important goal of the battle is for their species to survive and become the authors of their own stories. Again, this is a beautiful sentiment, but it comes out as a rambling, confusing speech, so it winds up feeling an inert. Meanwhile, the dramatic meaning behind the sentiment is that the show's narrative wheel spins ever on. William is alive on the beach, the two technicians Felix and Sylvester are eyeing Maeve's body and they'll probably revive her. None of it feels quite like an ending, just another reset in a show that is all about resets. And while I've always understood the concept behind the choice, the feeling of it all is another matter. Because right when we needed fireworks, we got dreary air.